Fox News Alert, day 99. We are one day away from President Trump hitting the 100-day mark. As new Fox News polling shows, his voters strongly believe he is sticking to his promises. President Trump is speaking from the heart on how his life has changed since he became the nation's 45th president. This is Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner. Here today, Sandra Smith.
I'm going to do one of these.
Meghan McCain, former national security staffer under Presidents both Bush and Obama, Jillian Turner. Today's hashtag one lucky guy. Fox News political editor, Chris Steyer. The Steyer is on fire. Outnumbered today.
I was told there was cake. Is this still true?
Did you hear Jenna Lee? Did you hear that news she dropped?
I mean, look, as magnificent of a privilege it is always to sit with you ladies, the fact that there was cake got me as a fat American on the plane up here.
I was getting all to the middle.
No, it's the cake.
And then
it's not about you, it's just the cake.
Oh, yeah, it's later. We'll throw hands in and forks and
But happy birthday, guys.
Thank you.
You're giving it away. All the fun.
All right. There'll be more fun later in the show, too.
Absolutely. Let's get started. It appears the White House will avoid a government shutdown after all. The House has already passed a one-week funding bill, and it is now in the Senate. The GOP's plan to replace Obamacare, a top priority for President Trump, won't likely happen, however, before tomorrow's traditional milestone. Although some Republicans are opening the door for the first votes to be held next week. The chairman of the House Rules Committee, Pete Sessions, says they want to get it right.
What we're trying to do is allow the time to do it right. We've not said next week, it's next week. We've not tried to set a time or deadline. A lot of people out there are trying to get me or somebody to set a deadline, but we're not trying to do that. We're trying to say, let's let things go.
Also, on this eve of his 100th day in office, President Trump is speaking personally about the challenges of the White House, saying in an interview that he thought his new job would have been, quote, easier than his old life. Meanwhile, new Fox polling finding that more than 6 in 10 voters believe President Trump is sticking to his promise to stick to an America First agenda. It's closer when the question is whether the president is keeping his campaign promises. Voters who say he is, just edging out those who say he is not doing that, and that falls within the margin of error, which technically means, I guess, it's a tie.
Yeah, for practical purposes.
Sticking to the promises, that's one column. Getting stuff done, that's another. How's it working out?
Well, look. Part of the misunderstanding about this 100-day stuff, the purpose of the 100 days isn't that you're a failure or success as a president within 100 days.
Can I jump in with something?
It's your show.
The Senate has just approved the funding extension.
Well,
that just happened. The vote was very quick, but we just got that news and wanted to share it with you.
So now they have 1 week. They have 1 week to come up with a spending plan to cover the remainder of the federal fiscal year, which runs through the end of September. So they've got 1 week to finalize a plan. And the test now becomes, will it reflect which of the president's priorities will it reflect? Which of the Republican priorities on spending and deficit and debt with Democratic priorities? Because they're going to need votes in the Senate to get it done.
Yeah, you know what's interesting, too, about this push in time. So with both the House and the Senate now voting for that extension of a week gets us beyond the 100-day mark and puts that off the shelf, too. So he got something done in essence because we're going to still be talking about it. But does it also maybe for chance get Obamacare into the conversation too? As I just had said, they might be having some early votes on that. What do you think?
Yeah, Chris, that's optimistic. There's indications there's a lot of movement there, but timing-wise, it's not like we're going to see a vote.
Many words have been said. Yeah. There is no question that many words have been said. And Byron York had a very smart piece on this today, which is, in the end, there are a substantial number of Republicans who don't want to repeal Obamacare, or at least right now don't want to have to deal with that, because you got to replace it with something. You have to fix it with something.
Right.
And when that consensus is not there, look, as I was saying earlier, arbitrary dates to maintain campaign promises are bad ideas. Good policy is good ideas. Policy that works, policy that Americans like, that will make them healthier, will make them happier, will make their insurance cost less, that's a good idea. Saying we did it by the 100th day, or we did it in a week, or we did it now, that's a bad idea. Voters care. It's a bad metric to say volume is the scorecard for good legislation.
Yeah, I do want to point out, though, that is not necessarily specific only to this president or this time in history.
But, Harris, you and I were speaking yesterday that no moderate has changed from no to yes on this bill thus
that we know of.
I have no reason to believe, Paul Ryan, at this point that any success has been made trying to get both the moderates and the Freedom Caucus on the same page. And then that's just getting through Congress, not even getting through the Senate. So I agree with you, Chris, that I would like everyone to stop with the sort of overreactionary, we're going to get this done, we're going to get this done now. And it looks like there's a lot of progress being made. I need some verifiable proof that we're making progress. And beyond that, it's sort of teasing the American public. And it's really teasing people in Arizona who are suffering so badly.
Right. Yeah, and that's what you also didn't like about the whiteboard presentation, because it was obvious from that very early on that there were just so many moving parts that they weren't agreeing on. And to some, maybe for you, Megan, it felt a little bit like a tease. Maybe Pete Sessions' his caution is so healthy for everybody in the country, and that is just, let's just take this step by step. Jillian?
Yeah, I that's a good point that you make about the whiteboarding and the optics of that. I would just say on the matter of healthcare, particularly in the first 100 days, this has been a really hard and fast lesson for Republicans, like that everybody can't have everything, I guess, to quote Aria Levy. You know, there's compromises need to be made, and you're either going to buckle down and make them, or you're not going to get, no one's going to get what they want.
Right.
Obamacare will persist. That is now, you know, the de facto way that we move forward as a country. So if you can live with that, then fine. You don't have to do the hard work.
Sandra, I want to ask you, too, because with this news that both the Senate and the House are on board, does that maybe indicate that you might scoop up some Democrats now? I mean, you've taken the wall payment off the table for this specific round of discussions. Right. We don't know if it'll come back.
I would defer my time to Mr. Firewall.
Or you could just make a face if you don't want to say anything.
Your faces are wonderful.
I think that there is broad consensus, bipartisan consensus, behind a plan that continues funding the government at current levels through the end of the federal fiscal year. Because here's the secret. This is what they don't want you to know. The game's over. No cuts or changes or anything substantial is going to happen. This is all about feelings.
Why do you say that?
Because the money's already spent. We're down now to talking about the last 5 months of the year. You know how the federal government works? You know how the federal government works. As soon as the appropriation comes out, you know what they do? They spend that sucker. And they'll pave the parking lot 5 times.
You got to give it back if you don't.
They'll pave the parking lot 5 times just to keep the money in the budget for next year.
Oh, don't say that. That's why we're drowning. That's so disheartening.
No, it's because they've learned. Look,
that's why we're drowning in debt right now.
Since 2007, we have had a government that doesn't budget. We have a government that runs on continuing resolutions, stopgap gobbledygook. It is a disservice.
Is that a technical term?
It is. It's a daggone disservice to the voters.
A daggone.
It is, and it's a disservice to the tax. Everybody who just paid all their thousands of dollars in hard-earned money in taxes. So the federal government does. Oh my gosh, hurry up and spend all the money that you can, and then we're going to have a shutdown. No, spend all the money you can. And this binge and purge approach that they're taking is the wrong way to govern.
Wow.
And maybe they can get through this year and then make a budget and then move forward in some.
That was such a bullseye. The timing that you talked about. I mean, April 18th, when everybody was coming to grips with what they'd given the government, and then a few days later. Wow. Okay, meanwhile, President Trump will mark his first 100 days in office with a rally in Pennsylvania tomorrow night. It will take place in Harrisburg, the capital of a state which he won in an upset victory over Hillary Clinton in last November's election. The president's decision to hold that rally instead of attending the White House Correspondents' Dinner might resonate with his supporters. According to a national poll, 88% of his voters agree that the media are the enemy of the people. Now, that made news when he said it, and now we've heard it so much, it's like, what do you think? The sting is off on
now. Yeah, it is. Now it's just part of the conversation, you know? It's like, well, the media doesn't understand us. The media has betrayed us over and over and over again in the last 3 administrations, and this is the new way of the world. I could not give a hoot about the White House Correspondents' Dinner and his decision to not attend. I don't think it's good or bad. I really don't think it matters.
It's an event that it's optional.
But on the optic of doing a rally, what I worry about is, I know it's great for the base. It's very respectful, a nice way to kind of commemorate the base, but since we are now getting into the 3+ month mark, what is he doing to try and unify the country?
Well, it's interesting.
Like, why are we? It's a little bit thumbing your nose at the folks who didn't vote.
Can I tell you why I like it? And I didn't vote for Trump, as we all know. I voted for a third party. I did not. I did not. Oh yeah, I voted independent this time around. This is why I love it. Because of the 3 things Donald Trump has done in the first 100 days, President Trump, excuse me, I know people don't like that. Neil Gorsuch, foreign policy, and the fact that he hates the media so much, and that he is, I say this often on the show, that I'm living through all the actions he's making by pointing out what jerks many people in the media are and what bias they've had and what a pass they got for 8 years under Obama. I hate the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Everybody knows that. And the fact that he's going, as he said in Inauguration Day, I give it back to you, the people. I give the White House back to you, the people. That was part of his inauguration speech. And I think this is another example. He's saying, I'm not going to go drink and have champagne and martinis with elitists that are just going to write nasty things about you and got this election totally wrong. I'm going to celebrate with you in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I'm telling you, it's brilliant politics. And if someone like me enjoys it, I think it's hitting more than the base.
Wow. I do have this question, though, just kind of piggybacking off of what Jillian said. Is making nice with certain members of the media necessarily the same thing as resonating with the rest of the country? I think that's assuming that the rest of the country all agrees with some more liberal members of the mainstream media. Maybe they don't at all.
So it's a do-si-do. Trump's doing a lot of media interviews right now. We see this Reuters interview that you were quoting from. He's doing with the Post, with the Times, with our own Martha McCallum. He's
Eric
doing
Bolling on Monday.
Yeah. But he's doing a lot of mainstream media interviews. The outreach is there. The White House is conducting itself in a much more hospitable, open way vis-a-vis the stuff, the press briefings and all those things. At the same time, he's moderating his positions. He's saying, NAFTA, we were going to nuke NAFTA, but maybe we like a little NAFTA. So he thought originally he was going to go to Pennsylvania and announce that NAFTA was dead.
Right.
And he's going to go there and say, okay, we're going to make some
renegotiating.
changes. So you do those things, but simultaneously you do other things, like the ones that our colleague described, that let the base know, I'm still with you. And I think it is resonant. I think it is significant to want to spend your 100th day with the voters in the state, the shocking upset.
Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
Spend that 100th day with those voters. That's awesome. And so that way it is about the yin and the yang of having to be the president of all Americans, but also to honor the people who made it possible.
Very interesting. Harrisburg. I like the first part of the word. Anyway, we'll move on. You mentioned it, and here's more. Martha McCallum has a very special exclusive interview tonight. She sits down at the White House with President Trump as he is set to mark his first 100 days in office. Yes. And you can watch the wide-ranging interview tonight on the first 100 days, the show. That's at 7 p.m. Eastern, right here on the Fox News Channel, FNC for the cool kids. New urgency in the standoff with North Korea. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson is calling for action before it's too late. So is the United States headed for a military showdown with that rogue regime? Or can it be avoided? Talk about a friendly audience. President Trump is about to speak at the NRA convention in Atlanta. His plane took off not too long ago. The first sitting president to do so since Ronald Reagan. We're here. We'll talk about it. You stay there and watch.
All right, this is a Fox News alert. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson addressing the UN Security Council this morning on the growing threat from North Korea. This after state television releases video showing dictator Kim Jong-un overseeing live fire drills. At the UN, Secretary Tillerson warning world diplomats that the time for action is now.
For too long, the international community has been reactive to addressing North Korea. Those days must come to an end. Failing to act now on the most pressing security issue in the world may bring catastrophic consequences. Additional patience will only mean acceptance of a nuclear North Korea.
And in an interview, President Trump warning that a major conflict is possible with North Korea, adding he prefers diplomacy to end the standoff.
Well, there's a chance that we could end up having a major conflict with North Korea. Absolutely.
Meanwhile, a new Fox poll showing 53% want the U.S. to take military action to stop North Korea's nuclear program. That's at least where the appetite is for American people. Chris Stirewalt.
If you can do it. And I would defer to my much wiser colleague, Jillian, on this. But North Korea's, the military options when it comes to North Korea are all bad. It's not like there are good, there's the reactor, hit it, and it's clean. No, this is buried in, and it's complicated. And, of course, the overwhelming fear is that their artillery batteries can reach Seoul and that they can reach American troops who are right there on the DMZ. We have real issues to deal with here, and any military solution would have to be pretty broad in scope. This is not flinging tomahawks off of a missile boat.
Jillian, as far as where the Fox News polling shows the American people are on which country poses the greatest immediate threat to the United States, North Korea sits at the top of that list, 38%, followed by ISIS, 25%, of course the Islamic State, Russia, 18%, China and Iran at the bottom of that list.
I think North Korea's number one is realistic, and I think people are starting to key into that lately. As this was going on, we were in not such a different situation during the campaign a few months ago, and all anybody wanted to talk about was radical Islam and ISIS, and that's all very good and well because I think the American people need to have intelligent, thoughtful conversations about terrorism. But North Korea has been there all along. This is not new. This is something that has been alternately kind of simmering and boiling over the last 3.5 years now. And as Chris mentioned, there's certainly no easy options, but there's also no good options. And anything we do vis-a-vis North Korea is going to have to be the diplomacy is going to have to be very multidimensional. I think that Secretary Tillerson in his remarks at the UN was speaking to China more than to anybody else. And what he's trying to say is, we understand that you're the gateway to the North Koreans when it comes to security, when it comes to propping up their national economy. And we're taking a harder stance now. We're not going to help you in this endeavor anymore. And I think that's really important for them to hear more than North Korea. There's no reasoning with North Korea. I also want to say just very quickly that the president's a little bit pulling a Hillary Clinton, which is not something I ever thought I would say, but this is smart power, what he's talking about. I'm going to try to do all in with diplomacy, and if it doesn't work, I'm maintaining the option to use military force against these people. That's an important tool in my toolbox. He's already started not using military force.
Yeah, it's opposite of what we saw from President Obama, right? Because he often would, in instances, take boots on the ground, or ground troops, I should say, or firepower against somebody off the table, as if to say, that means we're just going to exhaust all the diplomacy and you should feel like a safe space to come in and talk to us now. That is completely opposite. The other thing you haven't heard this president say was a phrase from over 8 years, saber rattling. In fact, I don't even know if there is a saber in North Korea. But every time something would happen with this rogue regime, you would hear out of that administration, it's just saber rattling. And I don't know if that meant that they took it less seriously or that there were literally that many sabers in North Korea.
But Megan, they've got our attention. And as you heard from President Trump, a major conflict with North Korea is possible.
Yeah, I mean, not to echo exactly what Chris and Jillian just said, but there really aren't any good options. We have made agreement after agreement going back to the Clinton administration for the past 20 years. Bush administration tried to do it. I think Obama just tried to completely ignore it. And now the chickens are coming home to roost. And I certainly don't know what the right option is, but it does seem like at a certain point the rubber's going to hit the road and military intervention of some kind is going to be where we're at. And what's scary right now, and I think what's making the American people collectively anxious, is I think everyone kind of knows that's what we're leading up to. And I have great faith in General Mattis and General McMaster, as I've said many times. And I think President Trump is surrounded by absolutely brilliant people that understand diplomacy and, what a complete and total maniac Kim Jong-un is. But when you're dealing with someone like that who can't be reasoned with and thinks that the world is a toy that he can just play with, that's why I think it's on this list of being the largest threat to the United States.
All right. Well, Texas joining the crackdown on illegal immigration, that state on the verge of being the first to ban sanctuary cities. So will other states follow suit? And President Trump about to become the first sitting president to speak at the NRA convention since Ronald Reagan. The NRA went all out for Trump in the campaign, so is this returning the favor? Fox News alert, this just happening moments ago. Vice President Mike Pence swearing in the new Labor Secretary, Alexandra Acosta. You'll remember that he was confirmed with a 60-38 vote in the Senate. He will be the 27th Labor Secretary. Remember, he's the son of Cuban immigrants, and he is going to be leading a big charge there. He's the only Latino in Trump's cabinet, but here we are approaching day 100 of President Trump's time in office, and the new Labor Secretary being sworn in by the Vice President just moments ago.
Lone Star State is opening up a new front in the crackdown on so-called sanctuary cities. After hours of emotional testimony, Texas's House of Representatives passing a bill along party lines that would effectively ban sanctuary communities statewide. The bill would also allow law enforcement to ask people about their immigration status during an arrest or lawful detention like a traffic stop. Meantime, Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly says he finds the pushback against trying to remove criminal illegal aliens baffling.
But it is inconceivable to me that you would ignore the law, and just as inconceivable that an elected official would not want a criminal taken out of the community for free by the federal government, taken out of the community after they pay their debt to society, taken out of the community and sent home. I can't understand it.
You know, Chris, he's asking a really legitimate question. Why wouldn't you want a criminal taken out of your community there illegally?
There is that point, and for those people who are proponents of sanctuary cities, they are against any effort because they see this as this epochal struggle with Donald Trump, and it's for all of these things. But when you see what a good job Kelly is doing in that post and how he is, as Harris points out, measured, as he is calm, he talks about things not in passionate ways. He's not talking about blood and soil nationalism. He speaks in these simple, pragmatic tones. As a former general, he knows how to do this stuff. He, I would say, is maybe my surprise standout of the Trump cabinet. We knew Mattis would be good because he had this great track record. We knew less about Kelly. We didn't know how he would do going from the Marine Corps over to what essentially is largely a police function. And boy, he's done a great job. He's really served well.
You were just on the border. Do you know if border security, if morale's up in any way with him taking over?
That's an interesting question because you and I both have homes in Arizona, have made some home life there. And so what both border agents and people who live on our side of the line, as we call it, have told me is that they see that there is an effort by this president to focus on what's important to them for the first time that many of them have ever lived there. And some of these are people who've been in those border communities for their whole lives, 40, 50, 60 years. So it is interesting for them to feel heard. I would say this just to kind of, segue out of what you were talking about. And that is, this is also the same secretary, General Kelly, who was the first to take responsibility for how it didn't roll out well with the original ban on illegal immigration. And how, yes, there were some problems at airports.
On the refugees.
He took accountability for that first rollout that the president put out there that had some called it in the media chaos. I think we all would agree, less than perfection. And it was interesting to hear him do that in a very measured tone. And that accountability, I think, has made his stock rise.
He's kind of slowly but surely, establishing a base of trust with the American people. He was not a terribly public figure before he was appointed secretary. Most folks, civilians, had never heard of him before. Incredibly sort of high profile in the Marine Corps, but outside of that, not so much. So I think it's nice to see somebody emerge from the shadows on issues like this. And really get some good policy going. I agree with him. For somebody who doesn't really have an iron in the fire in the sanctuary cities issue, it a little bit defies logic. The idea that you could have civilians subverting the law so flagrantly. I mean, it really empowers criminals, if you think about it. And from that point of view, it is a little shocking. I'm emotionally in tune with what he's saying.
So who else might follow suit? You were to take a stab at that.
Follow
in Texas' footsteps.
Well, we'll see how the court challenges go, because as you know, this will go up and then it will make its way through the court system, because Texas is doing something. We remember, speaking of Arizona, we remember the Arizona law about being able to question the immigration status.
Checking papers. That's what people said it was equivalent to, like World War II style.
And that faced legal challenges. So they have that component in there as well as the sanctuary city part. But one thing that is clear, that state has the power, it has the right to dictate the policies for the communities within it.
Absolutely. We probably won't see this in California, which wants its entire state to become a sanctuary jurisdiction.
All right. Meantime, in a week of events touting his first 100 days in office, President Trump would be hard-pressed to find a more supportive group than the one he speaks to in Atlanta this afternoon. The National Rifle Association, a group that went all in for the president in 2016. Mr. Trump will be the first sitting president to address the NRA's convention. since Ronald Reagan when he speaks to the nation's largest gun rights organization in the next hour. Although he favored strict gun control back in 2000, you'll remember, President Trump made Second Amendment rights a key campaign issue. Well, you'll remember this.
I take a lot of heat where I say guns, you got to have them. I'm a big Second Amendment. Big. We are going to protect, 100% protect our Second Amendment.
All right, so this is a big day, a big group that did throw their full support behind Donald Trump on the election. What will he tell them? How big is this moment, Chris Darwell?
And remember, they supported him to a degree greater even than any prior Republican president.
And earlier.
And exactly. They got in the game. When a lot of Republicans were still like, Trump, I'm not sure, they said, we are all in. Because you know what they knew? That they hated Hillary Clinton like God hates sin. And they were going to come right out. They were going to come right out after that. And they were not going to take any chances on that question, and Trump's broad promises to do these things. So yes, this is number one, his crowd, and they're going to be excited to see him. But number two, his ongoing re-election effort, this is the key component. Because remember with conservatives, Trump is going to change on NAFTA. Trump is going to do this. He's going to do things that there's going to be all the coverage. Oh, he's betraying his base. He's doing this stuff. If he's solid on guns, if he's solid on immigration, and he's solid on the Supreme Court, man, I tell you what, they'll give him a lot of latitude on other things.
And so far, all indications are that he is sticking to his promises on gun rights.
He's sticking to his promises. My query, if I could speak to the president for a few minutes, would be, you have not really, just a quick analogy. On foreign policy, he's changed a lot of his positions. And I've gone to bat many times on the air here and defended that and said, this is really not flip-flopping like we can accuse some politicians of doing. This is more of an evolution. Because he delineates that. He has verbalized and included Americans in the process. This is why I'm changing my position on China. This is why I'm changing my position on all these other issues, on NAFTA and the foreign policy sphere. But he hasn't done that for us on gun issues, I don't think.
No.
Meaning the fact that Harris brought up that in 2000 he was completely on the other side of this issue. How did he then pitch up for the presidential campaign and do a 180? What happened?
Well, part of the segue, I think, and I wouldn't call it necessarily a 180 for this president, but part of the segue was what was happening in the country with regard to guns in cities where they had such strict gun control. And remember, his focus was to put jobs in inner cities and to clean up those inner cities. And when you look at places like Chicago and others in other areas in Indiana where they have stricter gun laws, it's a non sequitur that you have such strictness with guns, but you have such outrageous violent crime going on. That's something that's been important to this president, and I think it's been a journey rather than a flip.
But let's bring this to now and what he may tell this group today, because there is going to be a bill that they are going to want him to throw his full support behind, this concealed carry permit. They're looking to have the permit work in states other than the state in which it was issued. A big deal, a big test of the president early on.
Good luck. That courts would allow the kind of reciprocity. So now states can agree to reciprocity. You got a gun permit in Arizona. There's a compact. Other states say, it's good here. You can carry the weapon here. Other states aren't part of that compact. The idea that the federal government is going to cram down and say that the reciprocity is universal, I think would face some legal challenges.
Well, it didn't work for gay marriage.
It did not. But I would just say, to your point, I think it's something worth mentioning. I'm sure that all you say is true. However, in 2000, he was running for president on the Reform Party ticket. In 2016, he was running on the Republican Party. You cannot get the Republican nomination unless you are in favor of a very strict reading of Second Amendment rights.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
So it's like...
So that might have made the journey more palatable.
Right, it might have expedited the process.
All right, the NRA awaits the president, as you just saw. President Obama heading straight to the bank as new reports reveal he's already cashing in a second $400,000 speaking fee check. Liberals not keeping quiet about their disapproval of that. Is this a bad look for Democrats? We'll discuss.
Cash.
liberals are not happy with President Obama right now. The outrage is building as the former president continues cashing in on the lucrative post-White House speaking circuit. New reports reveal Mr. Obama accepted yet another $400,000 check for an appearance he made with A&E Network's advertisers yesterday. This after a spokesman confirmed he's accepted a $400,000 gig to talk to a Wall Street firm, and he's not alone. Former First Lady Michelle Obama making her debut as a speaker for hire during a private question and answer session as well. The news now. Here's what Senator Elizabeth Warren had to say.
I was troubled by that. The influence of money. I describe it as a snake that slithers through Washington. The influence of dollars on this place is what scares me. I think it ultimately threatens democracy.
I'm not a psychic, but I called that before it happened. I said Elizabeth Warren is going to get really
Oh, wait. Sorry, well, what do they say down south? Oh, bless your heart.
Bless them.
But in all sincerity, I do think that the base of the Democratic Party, the socialist base, the section of Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, there's nothing dirtier than taking Wall Street money. So what kind of impact do you think this is going to have?
Probably not much, because we expect former presidents to go get rich. That's a sort of no one has ever done it to the degree to which the Clintons did it. But
and they took some furniture. Didn't
there's some China. There's some China that made its way. They eventually returned it. But former presidents go and get rich. George W. Bush gave speeches. Barack Obama's going to give speeches.
Clinton.
Well, for sure. But the question for Democrats is, if she's troubled by this, why wasn't she troubled by the policy? And maybe she was, by the policies that Barack Obama followed when he was in office. He did not govern when it came to the economy and Wall Street like that socialist base you described. He was, in fact, got pretty cool with Goldman Sachs. He got pretty cool with the idea of working with Wall Street to stimulate the economy and keep the Fed pumping and doing all that stuff. So he ended up not governing that way, and probably there's some sour grapes in that.
I think yes and yes and yes, but it is going to be a really insufferably long 4 years if we're going to have to cover every speech that President and Michelle Obama give. By which I mean, we're giving this equal time as we are a nuclear threat from North Korea. I think that at a certain point, it's like, okay, it's worthwhile to mention, it's worthwhile to discuss, but it's not worthwhile to drag this every time he gives a speech.
I agree with you.
You know what I mean?
And I think journalistically speaking, you cover the first public speaking event, as you did with this one, primarily because we're approaching the 100 days of his successor, and we were not sure if he would by name, although it had been said he might not, mention President Trump. What we did here was maybe a little peripheral, non-named sort of kind of getting around, some bank shots. But yeah, I mean, some shade. And so if that were to happen, if he takes on the current president, it becomes news and then you cover it. But
I'm going to push back on both of you. This is why it's news, because there's nothing dirtier than doing anything with Wall Street in terms of this socialist base, which I believe is the future of the Democratic Party. I don't think blue dog Democrats, moderates have a future at all. I think it is Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. So who is their new leader? Because if you have your ex-president who was once this big saint taking dirty Wall Street money, and that is something that it's not that I don't expect ex-presidents to get wealthy. Yes, of course.
But you don't really mean dirty Wall Street money, but
from the impression of people like Elizabeth Warren. Are you kidding? I'm a red-blooded capitalist American. But from the perspective of people like Elizabeth Warren.
Can I just finish this up with telling you why it matters? Follow the money. What is he going to go tell Cantor Fitzgerald for $400,000? Weren't they complaining that he was so horrible for business and horrible for the banks and overregulated and overtaxed? So why does Cantor Fitzgerald want to bring him on board for $400,000? What is he going to say to them?
It's a good question. So when we start,
I would then say that is a much less important issue than it was 3 months ago. He's a former president.
Accepting Wall Street money when it's a bad thing to do by the base of the party. I defend Sandra. I think it's worth covering. Okay, we got to move on. Bill Nye. This is also worth covering because he's a crazy person. You know, the science guy talking about his new Netflix series to combat climate change. But wait till you hear who he's blaming and who he wants punished.
just a moment. But first, let's get to John Scott with what's coming up in the second hour of Happening Now. Hey, John.
Hey, Sandra. In that next hour, we are awaiting the big speech by President Trump to the National Rifle Association, the first sitting president to address the group since Ronald Reagan. We will carry it live. Plus, Howard Kurtz on how the media are judging these first 100 days, a discussion of the tricky road ahead for the passage of the tax overhaul, and alarming comments on the standoff with North Korea. Are we getting closer to war? All ahead in the next hour. Happening now.
All right, John, thank you.
Thanks.
How does the left want to tackle climate change? Bill Nye, the science guy, suggests penalizing Americans for having too many children.
What?
He floated that idea on his new Netflix series, Bill Nye Saves the World. Here's a bit.
Should we have policies that penalize people for having extra kids in the developed world?
So I do think that we should at least consider it.
Well, at least consider it is like do it.
One of the things that we could do that's kind of least policy-ish is we could encourage our culture and our norms to change, right?
Wow, it's good to know that at least consider is like do it.
What?
That exchange is taking serious heat from the Twitter community. One user posted this, a tweet, Bill Nye Saves the World, paid for and sponsored by the Clinton Foundation. Another tweeted, Bill Nye is a lunatic. Bill, most families in Western world have 1.5 kids per family. Did you tweet that, Meghan McCain?
I did not tweet that, but I have 6 brothers and sisters, so I'm sure Bill Nye thinks that my family is ruining the world. This is what I will say. If you care about the environment even a little bit, which I do to a degree, but I am not an environmentalist. This is the problem.
I care to a degree.
I'm not an environmentalist doomsdayer. I don't think the apocalypse is coming because I have 6 brothers and sisters. And people like Bill Nye take it to such an extreme that if you have a concern about the environment, I love the Grand Canyon. I want the Grand Canyon to stay beautiful, for millions of years, thousands of years.
Till the sun burns out.
Till the sun burns out. But the problem is you have people like Bill Nye who are saying, you know what, Harris, you have too many kids and I'm going to penalize you in one way or another. And you take it to such a degree that it automatically makes any rational person tune out.
I have done a very good job of ignoring the current thing about the March for Science and the blah, because science doesn't need a march. Science is a method for understanding the way that the world works, and that's science. And so I've ignored most of this stuff because it seemed pretty stupid. But he knows, right, that birth rates in the West are declining.
Thank you.
He knows, right, that Americans and Europeans in the developed world are having too few children, in fact, that the problem is that we are not able to maintain the birth rates necessary. One of the reasons we have the immigration discussion we have in America that we do is that we need immigrants. We need 1 million immigrants a year in order to keep our numbers where they are so that social programs work, so that the economy continues to grow. We have a birth rate shortage, not an excess. And in China, in India, where now birth rates are way, way up, that's just...
The scientists might want to go get an economics degree.
Exactly. Like if you put aside the merits or the moral implications of this, like as a policy for a second, it's just straight up misguided because it's actually the undeveloped or the underdeveloped parts of the world that have overpopulation issues.
Yeah, but you can't penalize them because they don't have anything that you can take away necessarily.
I'm not agreeing with instituting this policy anywhere in the world. But the point being, if you were doing this because you wanted to help the environment, the place to target would not be the developed world.
I want to get to the money now because you said economy. Talk to me.
Well, if a scientist is going to propose something like this, they might want to give 2 sides of the story. The benefits and the downfalls for making this type of proposal, even though it's so out there, it discredits him. It might give it, be to his credit to actually give 2 sides of a story. Because otherwise the guy's just out there.
This show is very radical. I've seen quite a few clips from it. I'm not actively watching all of it, but I've seen a lot of clips from it. This is a very radical show, and if he does in fact
it's supposed to be an educational show.
But if he does in fact want to win over people like me, this is the exact wrong spokesperson to do it because he's so extreme in all of the issues, and don't waste your time watching it.
And with all this science march and all this stuff, what I've noticed though, it's not about science, it's not about that stuff, it's about virtue signaling and feeling superior to other people.
Amen.
All right, it's a special day here on Outnumbered. We'll show you why, and the music might give you a little clue.